and you find in time. Relax. That all the negative energy, it will all see. And you'll be at peace with yourself. You won't really need no one else. Except for the man above. Yeah. Because he gives you love. You can look into my life. You see what I
Sing.
I'm so beautiful. You see what I see. You see what I see. If you look into my life, you see what I see. Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Coffee with Tea. I'm your host, the amazing T Street. I'm so glad that you chose to join us tonight. As we shared last week, we are starting a series that started last Wednesday. It will happen every Wednesday night. Tonight had to be a little later because I had another commitment earlier. But we're shooting for 7 o'clock every Wednesday for the next couple of months. The series is titled, Tell Your Story as an Act of Faith, with the fundamental belief that when we tell our stories, we give other people the conscious ability to tell their own stories, but simultaneously, it frees us as well when we tell our own stories. And so tonight, we're going to flip the script a little bit. We have a special guest host. She is actually going to take the mic and the controls on the ones and twos. And for once, I'm normally interviewing other people, but she's actually going to interview me tonight. And so when I thought about what a task that would be, I'm like, who do I trust to ask the questions? And so I called Charity Martin King, my little sister, and said, hey, are you game to do this? And she said, I'll do it on a couple of conditions. I said, what? She said, it has to be unscripted. I'm not giving you the questions in advance. And it has to be uncensored. And I thought about it and I was like, I'm game. I'm a risk taker. Let's do this. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my sister, Charity Martin King. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about herself and about Lead with Purpose. So welcome to Coffee with Tea, little sis, and I'm glad that you're here.
You know, this is the wildest thing, okay? Because basically tonight, I'm going to get my Black Barbara Walters on, okay? And to be able to be here with my big sister is first and foremost an honor. And since I know she feels like she's going to be in control of the script tonight, but she's really not. So let me tell you about her. She is an author, a nationally known motivational speaker, an educator. She is a child of the Most High God. She is a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated Columbus Alumni Chapter. She is a mother, a sister, a daughter, and also someone who is very, very concerned about how young people are growing and developing. So let me introduce to you someone who I consider my big sister, a confident, the amazing T Street. How are you this evening, the amazing?
I'm well. It's been a busy day, but I'm excited to be on this side of the camera. I guess on this. I think we'll see.
We are flipping the tables. You started off with some Mary J. I'm Charity Martin King, co-founder of Lead with Purpose. You can check us out at LWP Academy, LWPacademy.com, and we do all this wonderful work with young people cultivating businesses, entrepreneurs, and training for leadership. Tonight, we are turning the table. So I am going to interview The person who is usually the one who interviews everyone else. So T, are you there? Did I lose her? Well, let's see how this goes. It looks like I may have lost her on this broadcast. But while I'm waiting to see what's going on, okay, there she is. I'll talk a little bit about how this came about. She usually is the person who does all the interviews for others, but today we're unscripted. So, are you ready? The Amazing, are you ready?
I believe I'm ready. You got to tell me, am I ready? I don't know what to expect. So am I ready?
We'll see. So first and foremost, what's in your cup? Tell me about your cup.
So my cup is coffee with tea. I'm a big coffee fan. I don't really drink tea a whole lot except when I'm sick. I'm a coffee drinker. I have to have my coffee every day. This cup is bell hooks. And one of my friends gave me this for my birthday, and the quote on it says, "Sometimes people try to destroy you precisely because they recognize your power. Not because they don't see it, but because they see it and they don't want it to exist."
Why did you choose that cup?
Whenever I'm drinking out of this cup, one, it reminds me of my friend who gave it to me, but it also reminds me that there's power in who we are, and whether or not we choose to harness that power or give other people the power to control us is really all up to us. And so a lot of people give away their power. They give people far more credence in their own lives than they should. And so that this cup always reminds me that not everybody who's watching is watching because they're trying to glean. Some are watching because they're trying to destroy. But I'm always reminded that that which God has for me is for me, and no one can take that which God has for me.
Okay. I want you to settle in. We're going to do something to warm up. I know you're not accustomed to being in the seat in this way. So let's do a little bit of a warm up, okay?
Hi, warm up.
All right. I've got 20 words. I want you to say the first word that comes to mind.
Okay.
When I say this word.
Okay.
No long pauses.
Okay.
I want you to say the first word that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Yes. Now remember, I got an old mind, so sometimes my mind don't pop as fast as everybody else's mind pops. It's not that I'm trying to make up something. It's just that my mind is old.
Okay, let's go. Let's settle in for a ride with the Amazing T Street. Your first word, black.
Me.
Amazing.
Me.
Community.
Oriented.
Love.
Is.
Purpose.
Mine.
Youth.
Everything.
Faith.
God.
Family.
One.
Cake.
I see.
Justice.
Now.
Education.
Paramount.
Money.
Fleeting.
Sisterhood.
Dope.
Pain.
Nonchalant.
Healing.
Necessary.
Motivate.
Purpose.
Turn.
All day.
God.
Number one.
Life.
Precious.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You started off with Mary J. Look at my life and see what I've seen. That's so appropriate. We didn't even talk about this before we signed on. And I'm going to tell you why it's appropriate, because when we had a conversation, you and I, yesterday, and I was asking God, where do you want me to go with this? With T, where do you want me to go with this? And this is what we're going to settle into tonight, everyone that's watching. We're going to talk about old, new, borrowed, and blue. Something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue.
Okay.
Is what he gave
If
me.
if they have questions, they can put it in the chat, and you're happy to convey those questions to them.
Old, new, borrowed, and blue. Many people don't know that we've known each other for a number of years. How long have I known you, sis?
Let's start off with the fact that you're younger than me, but we grew up in the same church. So I was a teenager and Charity was little, and then she kind of grew up a little bit and got to come upstairs with the big kids. So we've known each other since childhood and adolescence.
Mm-hmm. And we talked about the other day, because I think it's important, because we're going to go through. Let's dig into your roots when we think about your life with spirituality and faith, because there are going to be some things that we have that are very similar when we talk about spirituality and faith. You and I talked about this maybe a month or so ago about just how much growing up in the church made an impact on our lives. I want you to, if you can, please talk a little bit about some of your earliest memories of faith. When we talk about something old, your earliest memories of faith and how that has shaped who you are today.
So my earliest memories of faith weren't really about faith; they were about church.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like when my family first started going to church, they weren't Christians; they were just people who went to church. And for me, church was fun because I wasn't there for all of, and neither was my family. We weren't there for the let's walk out what we believe. We were there for the. My sister started going to church. She started going to this church. And my mom is that mom who is never going to let other people have control over her kids. She always wanted to know what we were up to. And she just didn't trust people to not hurt and harm, touch, molest children. And so the way that my mom and dad started going to church is because my sister, there was a bus that would come for this church that's on the east side, and it would pick us up and take us to church. And my mom wasn't feeling that. So my mom started going to this church. Well, not many years about a year later after we got there, this young pastor came. He was fire. Oh my God, he was fire. And the pastor of that church was old. And so the young pastor broke off and started his own church. And it was one of those storefront churches over on Fifth Avenue, man. It was dope though. Every Sunday it was all about leaving there, going to get food. For me, my first memories were about going to church. And then my mom and my dad and my Aunt Marion got what we called saved. They became born again Christians, filled with the Holy Spirit, speaking in other tongues as the Spirit of God gave utterance. And life changed for my family. And I became mad at God because life was no more fun. Because back then, the Pentecostal movement was so focused on God being a God of no, that it just wasn't fun for young people. And when you're young, you don't have to fear hell. You're like, oh well, I'm living in hell. You know, if I die and go to hell, oh well, because you're not really thinking about death. And so the threat of hell wasn't enough to draw me. We switched churches because my parents needed more word, which is the church where we met. And that was a Pentecostal church that had all the rules, no pants, no, we're in church all the time. Now, the thing I gave my mom credit for is my mom thought school was important. So during the week, all my friends were sitting up in church till 11, 12 o'clock at night. The only day we were required was Sunday. We went to Sunday school with my dad, and then we went to church. And that was our only required day. But even then, it was long. I mean, we'd be there till 3 o'clock on a Sunday. That's half of your weekend.
Right.
And so my first memories, though, was watching my mom become a Christian and watching her change. And it wasn't about anything she said. It was watching her life and how who she wasn't the same person anymore. And so it made me believe that this God thing had to be real because only God could have transformed this woman. Mm-hmm. But I was still trying to trip with my sister who was older than me, and we were kicking it. And then my sister went off to college, excited to leave our house and all the rules and all that. And my sister got saved her freshman year of college. And you talk about mad at God. I vowed that day I would never serve God. And I started spiraling. I'm like, I'm not. So those are my earliest memories of faith. It really wasn't about faith. It was about church.
What would you say in this segment about old? What would you say to young people or people in general who say that the church has lost its place. The church is no longer relevant. We see young people over the years leave the church as we know it as a structure, not the spirituality being of us being the church, because we are the church. But what would you say to people when we're looking at some of the foundations of your life, young people or people who are watching who just don't buy it, or who are leaving or saying the church does not no longer has a weight or relevance anymore? What would you say to that?
I would say I get it. I would say I understand it. I don't necessarily agree. I think that you have to find the church home that is right for you. But for me, it's really never been about the church structure. When I think about my relationship with God, do I believe that you should have a covering and a place where you're fed? And, yeah, but COVID has taught us that doesn't have to be in a physical structure. I get my food, my spiritual food from a church in Chicago that I belong to. I would say keep looking until you find the one that fits what you, and when I say fits, for example, when I was looking for a church years and years ago for my son and myself, I loved the church that I was in, but he didn't. And I remember when my mom left the church because we were unhappy, and she said it was more important for us to love Jesus than for her and my dad to be comfortable. And so we moved. And so I switched churches, and I ended up in a very large, white, non-denominational church that was really great for him. Wasn't everything I was looking for, but it provided enough. But what I fell in love with this was a Matthew 25 church. A church that truly served the community, that truly walked out what Christianity should look like, not talk like, but look like. And so for me, it was the right atmosphere at the right time, because I was so over the prosperity ministries and all those things. Not that we're not supposed to be prosperous, but if all the focus is on this and making money, we've lost something. So I understand how our young people may not see the relevance of today's, particularly in today's Black church.
Because I really don't think that we can truly peel back the layers of the amazing T Street without thinking about how important faith is in your life, and then that foundation that you have had from your parents, whether it be Pentecostal or Apostolic or non-denominational, and not doing things that are traditional. So that's something old, but I'm going to circle back to that. I'm going to circle back to faith, and you'll see why at the end. I'm going to circle back to that. What's new? I've been with you in many occasions when you're working with young people, you're speaking, you're pouring yourself out. You have spoken to young people all over this nation. And I know you know the phrase or the saying that a prophet is not always known in their own country. I have seen you when you are out, and I might have lost her here, but I have seen you when you are out and when young people are clamoring to get to you for autographs or to have a conversation, or are sharing personal details about their lives. And I may have lost T here, but one of the things that I want to emphasize while I'm waiting for her to hop back in here to the broadcast is that there's oftentimes that she's traveling, she's talking to young people about the book, and they're sharing these personal details of pain and of struggle. How does that formulate the what's happening now in the new? Did you hear that whole question?
I did. So you want to know how, when kids hear my story and they want to know. So for me, I don't think that you have to thump people with the Bible for them to get it. For example, when I go into schools, because of the church separation of church and state, I'm paid oftentimes with public dollars. So in schools, I'm rarely allowed to even say the word God. But understand that it still gives me an opening, because when kids hear something that sparks an inquisitive part of them, that makes them curious about where that came from, how did I get this strength? How did this happen? Oftentimes it's in those places that they come and they get to ask. and I get to talk about my faith. And I encourage them to follow me on my social media platforms. And it's not a secret to me that it's not a secret on my social media about the fact that I'm a woman of faith. And so for me, I just always look at it as I get to spend my time ministering in a different way.
And see, and that's why I want to go into the what's new, because there's times that I've seen you and I've heard the subject matter, but it's almost as if every time you do it, there's something new. There's something fresh that you're pulling out from each individual crowd. And is it a feeling? Like, where does that come from? Because I've seen you do this on many occasions. Oh, okay, I've heard her do this way, drive your own car. But every time you do it, seems like God gives you something fresh. Can you talk about that? The newness and the freshness when you're writing, when you're speaking, how is that happening when you're doing it? How is it happening?
So for me, it's what folks refer to as the anointing. One of the things I always ask God is when I'm on the stage, less of me and more of him. Give me words that this audience needs. One of the things that I have is a spirit of discernment. I've always had it. And so sometimes when I'm moving around a crowd, I can feel or see something on a kid. Can't explain it to you. I just see it. And I'll stop and I'll say, and I'll shift what I intended to say because something will hit me. And literally God gives me something I'm supposed to say to address. And I'll be like, I don't even know where that came from. For me, it's called the anointing, and it's called allowing God to be primary. And so for me, the new is that it's always new when God is in control. When God is really the orator and not you and not me, it's always new. When I'm scripted, that's one of the reasons I refuse to let people script me. When people ask me to send them a script, that assumes that I know what I'm supposed to say for that day. Most days I don't. Most days I ask, I usually try to stick to whatever the theme is. But I usually will switch things up based on what I see and feel in the audience. Like I've been in schools where I've seen a spirit of suicide in the school, having any knowledge, and I'll address an issue. And later on, the principal will say to me, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you said that because we've had 3 kids commit and 2 attempt this year." I didn't have any way of knowing that. So that for me is the new. Now, I do want folks to know I've not always been a Christian. Let me just be clear. I spent most of my life. I've only been a Christian for 18 years. I was foul. I lived a very foul life for a long time and was pretty unapologetic about it until I realized that I needed something more. So some of the stuff from which I draw has very much to do with my life experiences, none of which I would trade. I wouldn't take, as Maya Angelou said, I wouldn't take nothing for my journey now because it all gave me what I need. I remember asking God because I had a really hard self-chosen adolescence and early adulthood. And I remember asking God why he allowed me to go through some of those things. And he said, because it wasn't for then, it was for now. Because as the old people say, the devil doesn't have anything new. And so much of what our kids are battling right now, all the packaging looks different, but what's beneath it all is the same as what was beneath it all for us and and their parents.
And then I want to say hi to a couple of folks. I want to say hi to Bree, who's watching. Jahan is on. Crystal, well, boys, good to see you, sis. GL Woods. What's happening, GL Woods? I want to thank y'all for tuning in. And then I want to go back into when we talk about the freshness and the newness. I've been with you sometimes where literally right when you're finished speaking, you're exhausted.
Yes.
I've watched you pour out from your belly. And there's a scripture that says, it's Proverbs 18:16. And it talks about how your gifts will make room for you. How has your gift made room for you? What does that mean to you? Your gift will make room for you.
So I'm a 5 foot tall, voluptuous Black girl from the south side of Columbus who spent most of my adolescence locked up in juvenile facilities because of poor decisions on my part, who had at my foundation 2 amazing parents who made life perfect, meaning I had everything essential for success, and still made poor decisions, who was gang raped by 7 girls at the age of 14 in a juvenile facility. Yeah. And I'm reminded of a poem by Audre Lorde that says that the heavy-footed hoped to silence us. But this instance and this triumph, always remembering we were never meant to survive. So having this gift that God gave me humbles me, because someone like me should never have been entrusted with a gift so large. So I never take for granted. And I never abuse the gift that God entrusted me with. And the fact that He entrusted me with it with kids is super meaningful to me, because I think that our kids exist in our homes and in our schools and in our communities as victims of domestic terrorism. And so it's my goal, every time I have the opportunity, whether it's on a one-on-one conversation or standing in an auditorium full of 5,000 kids, or riding on the bus with them, or riding them around in my car, or just having everyday dialogue with them, that I'm never going to be one of the perpetrators of the terrorism waged against them. And so for me, my gift has made room for me, because somebody like me generally wouldn't have the kind of career that I've been blessed with. And so I believe that God opened doors for me that probably should have been shut.
I want to tell you something that Bree said. Bree says he qualifies the called. He qualifies the called. And so when you talk about your height and you talk about some of the obstacles and points of trauma, what if T was coming to your school or your facility, the T that you were back then, because you borrow from that T, because remember, old, new, borrowed in blue, because you borrow from that T to reach young people. That T that you are then, because I know your full government name, I'm gonna put it out there. What would the T, who you are now, you're in there or you're passing your old self, what would you say to her?
I would say, girl, thank you. Thank you, OT. Because of you, I'm a survivor. I'm not gonna give up. I'm gonna work harder. I would thank OT. I get to be the amazing T Street today because she paid all the costs. Because she paid all the costs for me to be able to sit in this seat. She took the dings and the arrows, and she suffered through all the abuse that made me strong. I tell people all the time, there's some things that I gained from my mom. My mom had a very strong work ethic, and she practiced excellence in everything that she did. She passed that on to me, and I have that in my DNA almost, that I'm a hard worker. I tell people all the time, you may be smarter than me, you may have more money than me, you have more pedigree, but you will never outwork me. I work from the time I get up until the time I go to bed. I'm always working, even if it's just my mind tick-tocking. And I got that from young T. Young T, those things for survival.
I want you to go a little bit. I want you to go a little bit deeper with that. I'm going to probe that a little bit deeper, because when I watch you and you go out and speak, I often get the feeling that you pour out so much because you remember.
Mm-hmm.
And when I watch you, oftentimes you become a teenager, and you're youthful. You're standing on chairs. We got cell phones in the air and everything else. You're jumping around. You're going up and down in the stands, and you're moving, and you're doing all of these things. I want you to go a little bit deeper. You said you would tell that to thank you. But do you think there was something you could have said to help that T in her life at that moment? What did that T probably need to hear? Is there anything you think about?
Oh, always. I always say both what I wish people had said to me and what people did say to me. One of the reasons that I mentor young people differently than some folks, I'm not a coddler. Anybody who knows me knows I'm hard on kids. My bar is really, really high. And kids are always telling me that I expect too much of them. And it's funny because the kids that I expect so much of never disappoint me. Ever, ever, ever. The bar is super, super high for all the kids that I work with, because what I know is if we don't raise the bar, they won't jump. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if we don't raise the bar, they don't even know that they can jump. And so I always wish that people had said to like 9-year-old T, when people would use phrases about me, I wish that somebody had told me that their definition of me was not the reality of me. I wish that when people had said to me, you ain't got no butt and no rhythm, I would say to them, yeah, and someday I'll be able to buy and sell you. Nobody told me those things. That butt and rhythm were not necessary for success. I didn't know that. I wish somebody had told me at that age that I was still going to be successful being short, voluptuous, having no butt and no rhythm. But I also give kids the message that when a teacher came along and threw me back into life, Emory S. Hill threw me back into life, I give kids exactly what she gave me, which was a belief that they matter, a belief that they can accomplish what they will. But I also tell kids what she always made me believe. She didn't have the phrase, but she certainly gave it to me like this. But I tell kids, you can't be whatever you want to be. You can be whatever you work to be.
Yeah.
One won't make it happen. But I always push kids in the same way that she pushed me. So yeah, when I'm out there, I'm ministering to young me as well, because I see the audience is full of young me's, and you are a testament. You can testify that most of the kids that I get to speak to don't look like me.
Right.
I'm rarely in schools because y'all don't invite me. I'm rarely in schools with Black kids. And if they're the minority and not the majority. So
I heard that because y'all don't invite me. I heard that. You said because y'all don't invite me.
But what I love about it is that God has given me a relevance to kids across cultures. Yeah. And I've grown and I've learned from other kids just like they've grown and learned from me. So imagine that kids who've experienced me, who don't look like me, who fall in love with the amazing T Street, now have a different version and a different vision of what African-American women are versus that which they've been told. So me standing in front of them and them connecting to the story that I'm telling or connecting to a piece of me gives them a different lens through which to see all Black women, and not all of what they see on television or what they have believed about us is true. So there's power in me being in those places as well. And so, yeah, but I am always talking. I'm talking to the younger me. I'm talking to the younger versions of all my friends. And it's there. I'm borrowing.
Bree's right. We've seen you crawling on the floor And then Joy Bivens is on, Ramona Reyes, Kieran Gallagher says hello. And then Minister Tony Cleckley is saying, in the words of the late, great Cicely Tyson, all my negatives created who I am totally.
Absolutely.
Let's go into Blue. When you think about the word blue, what comes to mind? Or the color blue, what comes to mind? The word or the color, what comes to mind?
Special.
Why?
One, in Delta Sigma Theta, my special is named Dr. Blue. And she, at a time in my life when I needed someone to come and place healing salve on some wounds. So special.
And it's interesting that you said healing and special, because my very note under old, new, borrowed, and blue is to talk about healing. And we have not talked before we did this. Is to talk about healing. What are some ways in the past year that you've been bruised and have had to work toward healing?
The irony was COVID was pretty good for me for the most part. When other people were like losing jobs and businesses, I had business. I moved my business to virtual and continued to do conferences and all those kinds of things. And so that part was good. During that period, it's not a secret because it's in the book. I'm not going to tell you the whole book, because if you want to know the whole story, go buy the book on Amazon. But When Love Flows from Broken Hearts is the story of the broken relationship between my son Christopher and myself. That's a bruise from which I will probably be healing the rest of my life. And so that was really hard. At the same time that I would say that my son was losing his mind at the same time that my mom had lost her memory. And so for the last few years, my mom was battling, and I never talked about it because it wasn't my story to tell. And I certainly would never have told this story a few months ago, that my mom had Alzheimer's. And so I was battling Christopher's issues on one end and fighting to watch my mom decline on the other end. And so less than a month ago, 3 days from today, will mark 1 month since I lost my mom. And so I'm still grieving, and I'm still healing from that. But one of the things that I'm so abundantly clear about is part of the healing from this grief is a reminder that I serve a remarkable God who answers prayers. God answered my prayers for my mom. Everything that I asked God for, he showed up. And so as much as I grieve, I know that grief is all about me and missing and pain and the void that's there. But it's certainly because God has changed, or my faith has changed. In fact, my mother's death and the way that it transpired and the timeliness of it and all of those things increased my faith. So when I grieve, I don't grieve as people who have no hope. And I also don't grieve because how can I be mad at a God who showed mercy on my mom and did not let her linger in the ways that some of my friends' parents with Alzheimer's lingered? That my mom, the weekend before she passed, knew all of us, knew her grandkids who came to see her, knew her kids, that I got to tell her my secret, that I got to eulogize my mom. That's a blessing. And so it's a daily struggle. And so part of the healing for me is just walking it out and recognizing that I'm not the first person to lose a parent. I won't be the last. My mama would have told me, okay, now put your big girl pants on, carry your butt back to work, and keep it moving. And you grieve when you need to, but you grieve on your time. You don't grieve on your boss's dime. You grieve on your time, because that's who she was. She was very ethical about time. And so those are the things that I take very seriously. And so I may be up at 3 o'clock in the morning on my time grieving, but I try not to do that on the time of my boss. That healing is there, and healing is a process. So most people who know right now, I'm looking for a Black therapist that I don't know. If I know you, don't put your name in the chat. I'm not coming to you. Black female therapist that I don't know who takes my insurance, because I, unlike a lot of people, I don't see the stigma attached to going to see a therapist. I think that our community could use more therapists and could use more people going to see therapists. And so for me, I can love God and see my therapist, just like I can love God and believe him for healing and still go to see a doctor. So that's where I am in terms of the healing piece. It's always an evolutionary process. Some days you're better than other days in healing. Some days I'm not angry about some things, and some days not just about death, and some days I am. Some days I don't feel like being forgiving.
Yeah. Well, I want to put on my and Kim E is on. What's up, Kim? Mama Mia, I see you're on. Good to see you. And everybody watching. I want to go back, the amazing T Street, when you discuss healing. I'm gonna put on my coach's hat with this. There's an injury that I think is very difficult to come back from. It's like ACLs and MCL, knee tears and knee surgery. To me, as a coach, I just feel like that is one of the worst injuries for an athlete to come back from. So you go in and you get the surgery. The rehab on a knee is tough because you can't cut and move the way you're accustomed to cutting and moving. You can't jump the way you're accustomed to jumping. You can't travel and go forward in your journey the way you want to because something's been moved and there's been some damage there in that injury. And then you'll get to a point with that knee or that MCL or that ACL, that tear, that replacement, whatever it is, especially for the athlete. A knee is very tough to come back from. Between knees and high ankle sprains, tough to come back from. But you'll get to a point of healing where you've strengthened it. And when you get out in the battle and some pain happens or some tilting, some interruptions happen, and then you experience a setback and you're reminded that you're injured, that there is a tender space. When I emphasize healing or in that example, what is that thing for you where you feel like, I feel like I'm over this, but I'm not quite over this? Where you think I'm good, I'm not bothered by that anymore. I'm being healed, strengthened, and then you have that setback where you say, I thought I had that, and for Black folks or for some of us, a lot of times we say, he's never done working on me. It's like, I thought I was past that. I thought I was healed from that. I thought I was done with that, but I had a setback. What is it for you that kind of gets in there and reminds you that there's been an area?
Always. T and Christopher. That's the area. It's always the wound that no matter how many pieces of salve I put over it and how many times I suture it, the smallest thing can come and scrape the scab off. And I always think that I'm healed and I'm ready to move on to the next phase of my life. And then something will happen. And it's just a piece that's so hard to put to bed. And so even when I think I'm done and I think that God has allowed me to move to my next level of healing in this area, it's the peace. It's the peace. Yeah. And as much as I be like, I don't care, it's the peace. And it's the peace I most want to be healed from.
Well, because your book, you just mentioned your book that is available on Amazon, and we want people to support the book. There's a nice section there, part of a dedication from Congresswoman Joyce Beatty that's there in the book as well. And you dedicated that book, which is essentially letters and messages to your son. I've watched you pour into young people, even my own son, very encouraging and pouring into him. How do you define, when we look at old, new, borrowed, and blue and healing, how do you define village and the responsibilities of the village? Because, that means different things at different times. But can you talk a little bit about the village when we're looking at healing in those areas? What's that look like for you?
It's interesting because the area that I had to, in the last 3.5 years, I had to ask God to grow me in, was in the area of expectations. So what I mean by that is, oftentimes many of us, we expect other people to be like us and to hold the same value that we hold. And in dealing with my own son, it was interesting to me to watch when he began to struggle. I have been there silently for a whole lot of kids. I have been a gap filler and a gap stander for a lot of parents in this city. And I never tell their kids' journeys. I never put my tongue on the things that are not positive, ever. My mom told me, when you have children, you never talk about other people's children because you never know what your kids are capable of. I've never, ever heard my mom ever speak disparagingly about anyone else's child. And I learned that lesson. But what was interesting is, as Christopher has struggled, where I have been a villager for some people, I have watched them become the people who malign me, who malign him, more importantly, him. He was a kid. And instead of offering help, they offered gossip, which was hurtful to him, and it was hurtful to me because I have been a gap filler for them. And so I realized that my definition of village and other people's definition wasn't the same. And I had to learn how to be okay with that, because for the longest time, I was not. I was so broken around, how can you not show up for my kid when I always show up for yours? And one day I just let it go. And I realized that the person who was ultimately responsible for me and for Christopher is God. And that's all. That doesn't mean that a few villagers haven't shown up. You are a villager for my son. My two sons are villagers for my son. But it's interesting. Very few folks that I have served their children have shown up to, and even some who bought the book and read it and know his struggle, ever reach out to him and remind him that he came from a village and that he's loved. And so for me, village is everything. And I will continue to be a villager for other people, because God never holds me accountable for what other people do or do not do. But he, however, does hold me accountable for who he has called me to be and for what he has called me to do in the lives of young people, my friends and strangers, that I'm still called to be a villager, a community villager for lots of kids, even if no one else ever shows up for mine.
Yeah. And then Andre's on. What's up, Dre? Andre Lampkins is on. Hello, Dre. How's it going? Good to see you.
That's family. That's Uncle Andre to my son. And he will tell you, even in his most broken state, that there's two men in the world that he trusts. So all the men who are watching, who are always talking that good game, most of the young Black males that I have the opportunity to interact with, and by the way, I run a male mentoring program, talk about the inconsistency of Black men. So I'm calling y'all to stop being pseudo villagers. Either show up or don't show up. Christopher will tell you the two Black men he respects are my father and Uncle Andre, because no matter what their relationship is, Dre is consistent. He is long standing and long suffering. Black men, y'all have work to do. I should not have greater influence and impact in the lives of Black boys than you do, because you're consistent. And some of y'all right now are going to be offended, and it's not my intent, but truth is truth. Pressed down, shaken together, and running over. You cannot continue to stand up and talk about all of this Afrocentric rhetoric, but not have anything of substance to put behind it. Because as my good friend, Dr. Lee, the late Dr. Lee Jones always said, image without substance is counterfeit. The bottom line is results. Everything else is rhetoric. So if you're not doing something that's consistent with kids, you're not a villager. You're a pseudo villager. And that's all right. But you don't get to claim the label.
I feel like it got real hot in here.
I just want whoever we are all going to be, just be that. Everybody wasn't called to be with kids. Some people serve on the other end of the spectrum, and they're great with senior citizens. Do that and do that well. Not everybody. I don't believe kids are everybody's calling. I don't. I'll tell you, senior citizens are not my calling. No offense, no shade, no nothing. That's not my calling. I'm on the other end. But for all those people who claim that's what they're about, and all you do is claim it and collect paychecks on the backs of Black kids' backs, shame on you. It will be required of you on Judgment Day.
Oh, you turned up the heat. You turned up the heat with that, which circles me back to, because we went through old, new, borrowed, and blue. I'm going to bring you back to faith. Because I know we have about, what are we at? About 10 minutes, a little less than 10 minutes?
Yeah, about 10 minutes.
Back to faith. You eulogized your mom.
I did.
And there were some new things that are coming. When we talk about faith, because growing up in the church, being in the pews, and what's been poured into us from mentors and pastors and youth pastors and parents, and those who have prayed for us over the years growing up. Take your sip and get just sip of this sip. T's got some new things going on. And I said something to you a few weeks ago that in watching you and what you poured out to young people, and then watching you eulogize your mother, is that oftentimes we go through things and it's totally preparing us for our next. And when you, like Bree said, you crawl on the floor, you will talk to young people afterwards. I remember being next to you when a young lady confessed to you that she was going to kill herself that day. And then she had heard you speak. It was a no judgment. You did not judge this young woman. Nothing. And connect her to some critical resources, had conversation with her. And then watching you eulogize your mom, and how God has brought you from such a mighty long way. Let's talk about this 5 foot. What'd you say? 5'2"?
5 foot.
5 foot. I was going to give you a couple inches.
I appreciate the inches, but no, baby.
Let's talk about what's happening in this 5 foot frame, Powerhouse. What's going on? You got some news you want to let share, or you don't want to share it?
I'm not really ready to share it broadband yet. Okay. I do have some things coming, but I'm going to tell you today, you know how you have some of those days and you be like, man, this was a good business day. My agent and I were having conversations earlier, and I was like, I'll make money moves. When somebody today was like, hey T, so we have a limited budget, and so I know this is below your fee, but we only need you. You have 3.5 minutes. I'll give but we only have $4,000. I make money moves. honeymoon. I was like, cool, let's do this, and I was pretending. So some big things are coming in my business. I'm expanding my team. I'm doing that, but I have some other personal things that I'm working out some things before, when you put some things into the universe.
Yes.
I shared a secret with my mom the Saturday before she passed, and she hadn't been really talkative or anything. And I asked her, could I tell her my secret? And she said, yeah. And my dad was standing in the doorway, and I whispered it into her ear, and she screamed, hallelujah, which made me know she knew exactly what was going on. And I'll share it probably in the coming months or so, but I want to get everything solidified, and because the devil likes to make a liar out of people. And so before I put it out there, I'll make sure that everything is lined up and ready to go. But
Well, I want people to know that there's so much more in store. There's so much more in store. And then I want to ask you this. At what point, or if you will ever get there, will you feel that I've done a good job? I think I can rest. Will you ever get to the point where you think I've done a good job?
Nope. 18 years ago, when God loved me enough to change me on the inside, I made a promise.
Mm-hmm.
I promised God that if he would clean me up, that I would walk out his purpose for me for the rest of my life. I intend to be what I call a grave robber. I tell people all the time, I hate the term potential. You'll never see it in a grant proposal from me. You'll never see it when I'm speaking to kids. You never hear me tell them, oh my God, you have great potential. I hate that word. I'm a fundamental believer that the greatest potential in the world is in the cemetery, because people leave here every day without fully realizing what they were brought here to do, or without fully realizing who they were brought here to be. And so we applaud kids for mediocrity when they were called for greatness. And so we let them settle with this word called potential. And I tell them all the time, and a lot of times when I'm out in the schools, I'll say, do I have any singers in the house? And a kid will raise their hand, or 2 or 3, and I'll call them, and I'm like, sing for me. I'm not going to sing. You're not a singer. Do I have any singers in the house? Sing for me. I'm not going to sing. Finally, a kid will stand up and sing. I'm like, I don't care what you sing. You can sing the phone book. Sing something for me. And when they start to sing, I start to talk about, and you'll start to see the atmosphere that they're singing in change. And it can be a school where there's been heaviness. I've been to some of the schools where there have been mass shootings. I've been to some of those schools afterwards. I've been called in to bring humor and levity there. And so you'll see the atmosphere change. And I start to talk to them about, who cares if you have the potential to be a great singer if you never open your mouth and sing? It doesn't change the atmosphere with your potential. I'll show them a light, and I'm like, what is that? They're like, it's a light. I turn out the lights. I'm like, what is it? They're like, it's a light bulb. I said, it's a light bulb. It's potential for light. But if this were in a room, it still wouldn't give us the ability to see as a bulb. It doesn't become light until we flip the switch. When will we all flip the switches of our lives? And so for me, I'm always going to be flipping the switch. And once I get good over here, I'm going to go get good over there. When it was time to move to virtual, I went and learned everything I could about Zoom and everything I could about these platforms. And I'm always learning what's the newest song, so that when I go into schools, I have some relevance. I intend to leave my grave totally empty. So if you try to come and be a grave robber, ain't nothing gonna be in there but a carcass. I intend to pour out everything that God has placed in me before I go to the grave. So when y'all see me laying up in there, y'all will know that everything I was supposed to do, I did. I honored my word to God that I poured out everything He had placed in me. What good is it if all that is in you stays and dies in you? Everybody on this call is called with purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has a purpose. Some people choose to walk theirs out and other people don't. But ultimately, when we don't walk out our purposes, we basically say to God, oh, well, sorry you gave me something. I don't really care about what you gave me. So for me, I'm like, yeah, I intend to always be evolving and changing. I intend to be that person, even as I'm leaving the world and folks are, and the nurses are gathered around me, or the people at the hospital, the nursing home or whatever are gathered around me. I'm inspiring them to live out their best life.
And I want to make sure I say, as the time winds down, I want to thank you again, the amazing T Street, for having me on to be able to have this candid, unscripted conversation. I also want to thank everyone who tuned in and those who will tune in even after this to watch it. And you really took me to those final thoughts, because my final question was, you covered it a little bit already, was what would you say to those individuals who are fearful and who are sitting on something that they're supposed to do and it's nagging at them? And you covered a little, that was my final question, even though we had not spoken. But what would you say? Can you wrap us with what would you say to those individuals who, because when you do what you do, you're vulnerable. As a writer, you're vulnerable. Here on this call, you're vulnerable. When you're speaking to young people, you're vulnerable. You allow yourself to be open and vulnerable. So can you close us out and just talk to people, for those who, because we said our gifts will make room for us, the old, the new, the borrowed, and the blue, and working through that in our lives. Can you please, the amazing T Street, close us out and talk to those individuals just for a moment who are sitting on something and it's keeping them awake at night?
So I believe that that gnawing that's inside of us is never fully quenched until we do the thing that is keeping us awake. Yeah. So I'm always afraid. People ask me when I get on a stage, and guys, I've spoken in nationwide arena with 10,000 people. And I've spoken in schools. Most of the schools I go to, their average population is about 5,000. I always laugh in Columbus City schools. We think we're doing big things when we got 698, 700 kids, because most of the schools I go to have about 5,000 kids. And so I have to do 2 or 3 assemblies. So no matter what the stage that I'm on, I've never, ever, including this call, gone before an audience where I wasn't afraid. I'm always afraid. My stomach is always churning, because I'm human. And I know that anytime you show up to do whatever it is you're going to do, there are always critics. And I'm always reminding myself that, you know, I let my work silence my critics. And if it doesn't silence them, it gives them something to talk about. Yeah. Your work will silence your critics, or it will give them something to talk about.
That's
just
a t-shirt.
And I would say, I don't use a lot of cliches. Everybody says do it afraid. I would say do it through the fear. And use fear as one more weight that makes you strong. Yeah. Because everything that you conquer, if you're lifting weights, you start off with 3 pounds, and then they moved you up to 5 pounds, and you thinking to yourself, I ain't never going to. You watching the people across the gym, and they're lifting like they're bench pressing like 350, you know, at 150, 250, and you're thinking, I'm gonna go past 5 pounds. I don't care what my trainer says. I'm not going past 5 pounds. I'm gonna stay on this 5 pounds. But you know, in order for that muscle to grow, you got to eventually lift up that 10 pounds. You got to lift up, because your muscle has to continually get a different memory so that it continues to expand and grow and become strong. Every time you do the thing that you fear, through the fear, that fear becomes a weight that will make you stronger. Yeah. Every time I get on the stage, I'm afraid. And every time I open up my mouth, I become a better speaker. I become a better orator. Every single time, every speech I give, I'm better the next time because I did it and I allowed fear to be a weight that made me strong. Too often, we allow fear to be the weight that takes us under and drowns us. If you're in the water and you're trying to tread water in the deep end and somebody put a weight on you, you're going under. We got to learn how to use the weight in our lives to our advantage. And so for me, the Bible said that God has not given us the spirit of fear. That don't mean it don't show up just because God didn't give me a whole lot of things that still show up. So when fear shows up, I decide I'm going to work my way through it and I'm going to use it to make me stronger. And so every time I hear that phrase, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. When fear doesn't kill me, the next time I come out, I'm an even stronger beast. I've become a better speaker over the years because every single time I do it through the fear. I always look at it like I'm walking through a wall. Fear is a wall. It is the thing that keeps us from living our dreams. On the other side of that wall called fear are the very things that will bring us principal joy. That's why the enemy doesn't want us on the other side of fear. So walk through the wall of fear. Do it through the fear. Whatever that thing is, do it through the fear. Before I go, this is my favorite poem. And it's by one of my favorite essayists and poets. For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone, for those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways coming and going, in the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward, at once before and after, seeking a now that can breed futures like bread in our children's mouths, so their dreams will not reflect the death of ours. For those of us who were imprinted with fear, like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk. For by this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hoped to silence us. For all of us, this instant and this triumph, we were never meant to survive. And when the sun rises, we are afraid it might not remain. And when the sun sets, we are afraid it might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard or welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive. Audre Lorde.
Thank you, the amazing Peace.
Thank you, my sister. Thank you for everybody who came on tonight. I will, of course, be going back to read your comments because I couldn't read it because I was she had me too nervous. She had me too nervous tonight.
Thank you for everybody who tuned in. This was totally unscripted. The amazing did not have any clue on what we will discuss this evening. And I publicly say thank you for your transparency and your vulnerability.
Thank you. Next week, I want to share that our guest will be Shonda Wingo, who's going to come on and blow your mind with her story of triumph and victory. You don't want to miss it. 7 o'clock next Wednesday at 7 o'clock, same bat time, same bat channel. You don't want to miss Shonda Wingo. And the week after that, my friend Tina Levine from Florida, who just opened up a recovery high school in Florida, the first recovery high school in that state. I'm so excited to have her on. Her own battle back from, she's from Ohio. I met her years ago when I worked with Teen Institute. She's now in Florida doing amazing things and just opened a school. She's going to come on and talk about her own battle back from alcohol and drug addiction to now having a school and being a national speaker, having her own television show. She bad. She's my speaker. I always tell her, I'm like, you're a bad white girl. She's going to be on the last week in February. So we're going to be doing this series. If you're trying to come on, I'm hoping that if you want to come on and tell your story, email us at amazingteistreet@gmail.com and say, I want to be on and tell my story as an act of faith. This series is called Coffee with Tea, Tell Your Story as an Act of Faith. So that I had to put the plug in for next week. Charity, anything else you want to ask before we close out?
No, I do have one last thing. What's the number one song in your playlist?
The number one what?
Your number one song in your playlist.
Every morning, there's a song called I Look to God by Tasha Cobbs Leonard. I worship to that song every day. And the day that I got up to mourn my mom, that was on my spirit. And so I opened up with it, with just a piece of the chorus. It says, hallelujah, my God reigns. No matter what we're going through, y'all. Hallelujah, my God reigns. Hallelujah, my God reigns. So no matter what's going on, I'm really clear that in the midst of pain, in the midst of grieving, in the midst of mourning, still my God reigns. And I look to him because no matter what's up, he got this.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, sis.
Thank you. Everybody give Charity a hand. My girl is dope. I hope that you all will pay attention. Charity, will you please give a plug for your program that's coming up that you and your business partners are doing? Can you give that plug real quick and tell them where they can get
Sure.
this
Thank
free?
you for allowing me. Thank you for allowing me to do that. Check out Lead with Purpose, lwpacademy.com. We're having a workshop coming up. It's totally free about information about how to write that winning proposal. A lot of times we lock ourselves out to critical funding because we don't know how to fund our ideas. We learned over the past year, my co-founders and I, is that small business creation by Black women has spiked. And we are, as Black women, the highest in terms of developing new job creation and new businesses. But just as much as we are spiking in that area, what troubles us or can be an obstacle is the inability to access capital. And you don't have to be a Black woman to attend the session, but we want to offer this information to our community. Check out our resources and services. We have that coming up. And then behind me, you see the cover to my children's book behind me that's coming out here in the next few months. So just check us out. We want to empower people. So thank you for the platform, The Amazing T Street, and check out lwpacademy.com.
And if you want to come on and tell your story as an act of faith, amazingteistreet@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much. I'm the Amazing T Street, but I can assure you there's absolutely positively nothing amazing in me that's not in each and every one of you. I charge and challenge you to walk in your own amazing. Have a great evening, everybody. Time for prayer, Charity. Just in time.
All right, let's hop on that prayer call.